The Black Hill Butcher, a remote woodland near West Calder. December 17, 2015. A dog walker is out in the cold. His dog suddenly bolts, digging at the earth. The walker moves closer. He sees a bone, then a human skull. Police seal the area. Forensics begins the slow work. The remains are not intact. Only a spine and skull are recovered. They belong to a man who vanished 8 months earlier. The victim is 53-year-old Martin Hamilton, a man known to police and the underworld. They called him the Black Hill Butcher. He was one of Scotland's most feared and most wanted criminals. How did a notorious gangland enforcer end up dismembered in the woods? Who finally silenced the butcher? And what secrets were buried with him? Today's story traces a path of brutal terror from the high rises of Glasgow to a shallow grave in West Lothian. Stay with us as we reveal the complete truth.
Before he was a headline, he was a child. Martin Hamilton was born in the Merry Hill area of Glasgow and grew up a few miles away on Holsworth Street, in the shadow of the Cranston Hill police station. He was short, standing only 5 feet, 5 inches tall, with a chubby frame. He spoke with an excessive, rapid speed. But this unassuming exterior hid a nature so volatile that, even as a teenager, he was feared. Fellow pupils would try to avoid him. If he got on the school bus, kids sitting at the back would scramble out the emergency door rather than share the space. This fear followed him into adulthood. His criminal career began in earnest, and in 1984, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison for assault with intent to cause severe injury and possession of an offensive weapon. When he was released, he returned to the Glasgow underworld, a place he navigated with brazen, unpredictable violence. In the early 1990s, he was shot on 2 separate occasions near his home. The attacks prompted the Glasgow Evening Times to run a headline that would define him for the rest of his life. Scotland's most hated man. He was not a Mr. Big. He was not a high-level strategist. He was a hands-on enforcer, a dealer in drugs and armed robberies, a man most other gangsters gave a wide berth. His nickname became the Black Hill Butcher, a reference to the area in the northeast of the city where he operated. In 1992, at 30 years old, Hamilton was one of 4 men found guilty at the High Court in Stirling. Their crime was conspiracy to rob a branch of the Dunfermline Building Society at an Island Cross. They had broken in with a key, armed with knives and an imitation handgun, and planned to lie in wait for staff to arrive. They believed they could get away with more than £30,000. But the robbery turned into a farce. After 5 or 10 minutes inside, they realized it was a setup. A lead detective famously told the media that it seemed only 4 people in Glasgow had not known about the stakeout, and that was the raiders. Hamilton went back to prison. When he was released, his reputation for sadism grew. He was a heroin dealer with a sickening twist. He enjoyed hurting people. He was gay but was said to be embarrassed by it, hiding his tendencies from certain underworld figures. He preyed on the young men who fell into his debt. He was known to exchange drugs for sexual favors, often leaving his victims little or no choice. He was a violent bully who took pleasure in torture. He would abduct young men, hold them hostage, and repeatedly assault them. On more than 10 occasions, he faced high court charges for abduction and torture. Every time the case collapsed, witnesses, terrified, would withdraw their evidence or simply become non-responsive. Other underworld figures used him as an enforcer, but he was a double-edged sword. If they asked Hamilton to do a job, they could not be sure he would just do it. He might go too far, attracting additional and unnecessary attention from authorities. At one point, the powerful gangster Paul Ferris paid Hamilton a visit at his mother's house in Anderson. Hamilton had been harassing William O'Neill, the younger brother of one of Ferris's friends, over a drug debt. Ferris told him to back off, but many other victims had no one to protect them. Hamilton's time in Glasgow was coming to an end. He was in his late 30s, and his volatility had made him a problem. The final straw came when he accepted a contract from the legendary underworld figure Arthur Thompson. The job was to shoot rival gangster Paul Ferris. Hamilton accepted the gun and the upfront payment. Then, he went straight to Ferris, told him about the hit, and walked away with the money, having completed none of it. It was an extremely brazen move, and it meant his options in Glasgow were dwindling. Around 1998, Hamilton, now 37, decided a change of surroundings was required. He set his sights on Edinburgh. Nobody recognized the small, chubby-faced man as his car drove through the multi-story blocks of Wester Highley's. But they would soon know him. Hamilton saw that Edinburgh's drug trade was ripe for a takeover. Unlike Glasgow, the capital had faceless traffickers at the top and small-time dealers at the bottom, with very few people in between. It was perfect for someone with a hands-on approach. He focused on the west of the city, Wester Highley's, Broomhouse, and Sighthill. Detectives from the Lothian and Borders Force later admitted they knew little about him when he arrived. But a string of shocking assaults against low-level dealers who owed him money quickly brought him to their attention. He supplied teenage dealers with heroin and ecstasy, then inflicted horrific retribution if they failed to make their repayments. Within months, he and his crew were running much of the drug business in the west of Edinburgh. His terror campaign also spread to Portobello and Musselburgh, where he hassled publicans, club owners, and businessmen. Officers identified one pub landlord who was being targeted for extortion. The man eventually told police he would rather pay the £30,000 demanded than testify against Hamilton. Another landlord, Billy Sibbald, allegedly did business with him, buying £100,000 worth of drugs while Hamilton was locked up. Sibbald thought he could forget the debt, but in November 2002, he went missing. 3 months later, in February 2003, his body was found in a ditch on the outskirts of Edinburgh. He had been blasted with a shotgun. Hamilton's tactics were simple: work for him or face violence. Most chose to work for him. Those who did not ended up in the hospital. His violence was so vile that police chiefs put a surveillance team from their major crime unit on him, watching him around the clock. But then, as he had in Glasgow, he went too far. In 1999, an 18-year-old boy had gone to Hamilton's base to get drugs, but did not return. His girlfriend, also 18, went to the flat looking for him. She found him unconscious on the floor. Aware of Hamilton's reputation, she started a screaming row. Hamilton punched her. She retaliated, smashing a lamp over his head. This act of defiance sealed their fate. The couple was driven to a flat in Glasgow's Anderson area. They were petrified. They were made to stand in the bath, a common tactic of Hamilton's, so that blood could be easily washed away. Then, a horrific 10-hour ordeal began. Hamilton shouted out the orders. He watched as a knife was pushed through both of their cheeks. Then they were told water was being boiled. Hamilton, screaming and shouting, poured it over them, scarring them for life. It was not the most horrific torture session Hamilton ever orchestrated, but it was his last. He had finally picked 2 young people brave enough to give evidence in court. The trial was moved 200 miles north to the High Court in Inverness. It was deemed too risky to hold it in one of Hamilton's former cities, fearing intimidation of the jury and witnesses. A media blackout was ordered, and the young couple was placed on one of the tightest witness protection programs ever seen in Scotland. The court heard of the couple's torture. It also heard of other incidents: an attempt to gouge a man's eye out with a spoon, fingers being cut off, people being set alight. On November 3, 2000, Hamilton, then 39 years old, was convicted of abduction, torture, drug dealing, and sodomy. The judge, Lord Kingarth, sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum recommendation of only 9 years. In his sentencing, Lord Kingarth told Hamilton that he took sadistic pleasure in the infliction of pain and the inspiration of real terror. He added, "You pose a substantial danger to the public." One senior Edinburgh detective, who had followed Hamilton for almost 5 months, was quoted as saying, "Hamilton is as evil as child killer Robert Black. He lured young men into his company with a supply of drugs. If they did not come up with the goods, he would simply abduct them and sexually abuse them in the most violent ways imaginable." Prison did not soften him. While incarcerated, Hamilton was allowed to act as a listener. In this role, a mature prisoner provides support for a vulnerable inmate. Hamilton used it as a mechanism to get them alone. One of his victims was John Carmichael, a vulnerable teenager on suicide watch. Hamilton assaulted him in the most despicable of ways. In 2005, Hamilton appealed his sentence. In Hamilton v. Her Majesty's Advocate, he argued that the judge should have given him an extended sentence, not a discretionary life sentence. The appeal was refused. The court upheld Lord Kingarth's assessment, confirming that Hamilton's crimes, his record, and the terror he inspired made him a substantial and indeterminate danger to the public. Despite this, Martin Hamilton was released on parole in September 2014. He was 53 years old and walked out of HMP Shotts, or perhaps Castle Huntly Open Prison, still considered extremely dangerous. He did not lay low. He almost immediately breached the terms of his license. By that same month, September 2014, an arrest warrant was issued and a full-scale police manhunt began. Police Scotland made a public appeal, warning the public not to approach him. They believed he was hiding out with financial help from others, as he had not withdrawn any money himself. Hamilton tried to go back to his old ways, operating in small towns like Blackburn in West Lothian and Harthill in North Lanarkshire. But his old reputation did not carry the same threat. His options were limited. His former crew was dwindling. One of his once feared enforcers, Albert MacDonald, was himself brutally murdered in June 2015, dragged from a car, stabbed, and stamped on by a man named Grim Higgins. With his Glasgow connections fading, Hamilton found new work. He became a debt collector for a powerful Liverpool drug cartel. The job came after one of the cartel's dealers was taken to a hospital following a motorbike crash. That dealer had a tick book, a log of debts. Hamilton was handed the book and given a simple mission: collect the money. The total was roughly £40,000, though some sources reported it was as high as £75,000. Hamilton saw an opportunity. He collected the money, or perhaps he just lost the book. Either way, he failed to hand over the amount to his Liverpool bosses. He had skimmed off the top, and in that business, failure is a death sentence. At the same time, he had become a liability to his old contacts, the Daniel crime clan in Glasgow. He was reportedly trying to play both sides, the Liverpool cartel against the Daniels, thinking he could double deal his way back to the top. The trap was being set. Underworld whispers pointed to the most painful betrayal of all. A family member, possibly a nephew or a cousin, who was loyal to the Daniel clan, allegedly set Hamilton up. This relative knew his routines, knew who he trusted, and lured him to his death. By October 2015, Hamilton was still just a missing person. A further appeal was made on the BBC's Crime Watch programme. The Crime Stoppers charity offered a reward of £2,000 for information leading to his arrest. But Hamilton was already dead. On Thursday, April 16th, 2015, Martin Hamilton was seen for the last time. It was lunchtime, and he was walking alone on Great Western Road in Glasgow. Then he vanished. He had been lured to a house on Moorside Drive in Blackburn, West Lothian. He may have been met by a trusted face, or by strangers sent north from Liverpool. What happened inside was fast and savage. Hamilton was shot in the head. He was then subjected to extreme blunt and sharp force injuries. The butcher was butchered. His body was dismembered. The killers, allegedly including a local man named James Farley, meticulously cleaned the house. They ripped out the kitchen units and bleached the walls and floors. They drove Hamilton's remains to a remote patch of woodland near the Five Sisters Business Park in West Calder, off the B7105. They dumped his skull and spine into a shallow grave. It was reported that police were investigating a second site, concerned that the rest of his body had been cut up and dumped in various locations. His limbs were never recovered. For 8 months, Hamilton lay in that shallow grave. On Thursday, December 17th, 2015, a dog walker was in those same woods. The dog ran off the trail and began digging furiously at a patch of disturbed earth. The walker approached and saw the bones, a human skull and part of a spine, rotting in the dirt. Detective Superintendent Kenny Graham was assigned to lead the inquiry. Police confirmed the remains belonged to Martin Hamilton. The death was an execution, a gangland hit. In January 2016, police made their move. They arrested 52-year-old James Farley, a Blackburn resident known as Scouse for his Liverpool roots. Farley was no stranger to police, with a rap sheet for drug charges. The investigation delayed Hamilton's funeral for 8 months, as the defence team for the accused man could request a second post-mortem. Finally, in August 2016, a 20-minute ceremony was held at Glasgow's Maryhill crematorium. Only a handful of mourners attended. A death notice described Hamilton as a beloved son to his mother, Margaret, a loving brother, and a much-loved uncle. In January 2017, James Farley appeared at the High Court in Glasgow. He was charged with murder, attempting to defeat the ends of justice by dumping the body, and being involved in the supply of cocaine. He denied everything. The trial was set for May, but it would never happen. Farley was dying. A life of addiction had taken its toll. On March 2nd, 2017, he was granted compassionate bail and released from Sutton Prison in Edinburgh. He had terminal cancer. On Saturday, March 25th, 2017, James Farley died. With his death, the case against him was formally closed by the Crown Office. The man who terrorized Glasgow and Edinburgh, who took sadistic pleasure in torture, and who was finally betrayed by his own, was dead. The man accused of his murder was also dead. Justice, in any conventional sense, would never be served. The full truth of who gave the final order was buried with them.
Martin Hamilton's life was defined by extreme sadistic violence, but the system that allowed him to operate for decades was built on something quieter: fear. In 2018, the Scottish government published a major study on organized crime. Researchers, including Alistair Fraser and Niall Hamilton Smith, interviewed 188 people in communities affected by these gangs. Their report mapped out exactly how organized crime works on the ground. It is not just about violence, it is about control. Gangs embed themselves in neighborhoods, often by controlling the drug supply. They exploit addiction and poverty, creating a cycle of debt. Once people are indebted, the gangs enforce repayment. The study found that even when physical violence was not constant, the threat of it was. It shaped daily life. People felt watched, intimidated, and unable to go to the police. This fear becomes a weapon, ensuring silence. This is the exact ecosystem Martin Hamilton used to build his reputation. He did not just sell heroin. He created dependency. He used the dates as a leash. When his victims could not pay, he tortured them. The report explains the silence that follows. People in these communities often believe reporting is worthless. They fear retaliation. This is why Martin Hamilton was untouchable for so long. At least 12 different high court cases against him collapsed. The witnesses were simply too terrified to speak. In the end, Hamilton was not just a lone sadist. He was a perfect product of his violent system. And in April 2015, that same system built on death and brutality swallowed him whole. Thank you for watching this documentary. Come back and join us for our next story.